Till 7:50. Hello there. Thanks for joining me on YouTube Live for this, what I'm calling the new normal, which is me in pajamas in a wood panelled room speaking to you live right now. Over the course of the next 45, look, I used to do this stuff for a living. I can jump right into this. Over the course of the next 45 minutes, we'll talk about some breath techniques. We'll demonstrate a little bit of Kundalini yoga, see if we can access that second consciousness. We'll try and have a little bit of a laugh together, try not to take life too bloody seriously. We'll see what we can achieve together. There's some things I want to tell you about upcoming guests on Under the Skin, like Wim Hof. That will be freely available everywhere. Joe Wicks is coming up next week. A little bit after that, we'll be talking to the incomparable, the great, one would say, perhaps the John Cleese of our time, Ricky Gervais, one of the great comedy voices that this country has ever known. All these people coming up on Under the Skin soon. Today, though, it's just me and you in our new solitude, in our new isolation and confinement. Find a way of connecting simply together, of accepting that in spite of our many differences, you might not be wearing a pair of little gym jams with one ripped off button at the top revealing ever more grey chest hair in an ever more grey world. Fortunately, the inner life gets more psychedelic by the second, but we are ultimately, even within our uniqueness, from the same great source. Here's a few questions that I've been sent. Look how they're titled. There's easy questions. That's a piece of cake for me. Then there's over here challenging comments. Oh, imagine that. Let's do one easy question from Rose Coloured. What's your best way of coping with low moods during these uncertain times? Today, I've been a little bit moody. I've been a bit moody with my missus. I felt a bit challenged and fearful. How I did it is I recognised I was thinking about myself too much. I started offering people help who frankly didn't want it. I'm troubling the elderly all over the place. Do you need anything? If I'm out on my run, if I see an old person, oi, do you need anything? Yeah, I need you to back off, mate. You're probably carrying that virus. No, I'm clean as a whistle, me. How about some Ovis? Let me give you some Ovis or a jam of peanut butter or a jar of peanut butter or something. Let me help you. So I'm trying to help other people. Talking to my mum, talking to my in-laws. I'm doing like the same sort of things as you. Trying to do Joe Wicks's PT class. I can't do that. I can't take no, I love Joe Wicks. He's absolutely bloody amazing. He's coming on the show, but I can't go back to PE. It was hard enough the first time, wasn't it? I can't put myself through that ever again. It's too painful. So the way I'm doing it is thinking about how I can be useful or of help to other people, which is a, challenging thing. Thank you for some of these lovely comments over here. Have you gone crazy yet, says Katie Saville? A little bit, mate. It was just a nudge. Let's face it wasn't a long journey. Please talk about how weird it is that everyone is freaking out about COVID-19. And I saw the comment, sort of global warming. Well, I suppose the gist of your question was, why are we so concerned about COVID-19 and not about global warming in the same way? I suppose because it will affect, but COVID-19 has more capacity to affect us individually. And I think people find it difficult to conceptualize global warming. It doesn't seem to matter how often we have it explained to us. It seems like it's a problem that's beyond our control. And in a sense, it is beyond our control because the social changes required are enormous. And whilst that takes all of us to contribute individually, it won't matter unless we all do it collectively. Now, you could say the same thing is true of enlightenment. If enough of us become individually enlightened and awakened, society will necessarily change. So how do we continue to stay inspired on our spiritual journey, knowing that there's only so much we can do individually? It's a great challenge and it's a great question, but it does, look, people are more scared of, being in an airplane crash, not anymore, can't get on an airplane, than a car crash, even though car crashes are much more common. It's just certain things evoke fear more vividly, more dramatically. I would say it's to do with that probably, mate. So the way I'm dealing with feeling down in these low moods in these uncertain times is by thinking about how I can help others, and by prayer and meditation, which I'm going to show you I'm going to demonstrate some breath techniques to you in a minute. Wim Hof, he's the next guest on Under the Skin. He taught me through his fantastic method. And if you want to learn more about Wim Hof's breathing techniques, then you should download his app. If you haven't heard of Wim Hof, then you should, if you haven't heard of Wim Hof, you should check out the Vice documentary on him. That's fantastic. He's known commonly as the Iceman, and through breath techniques, he's broken lots of world records. typically world records connected with cold and endurance, swimming under sheets of ice 66 meters, climbing Kilimanjaro in his underpants. And he said to me that me and him and a group of others, including some 56-year-old ladies, these are the only details I've got, are going to climb Kilimanjaro in September, if there is a September. The link for Wim Hof is in the description here if you're interested in learning more. I'm getting occasional messages from Jenny Mayfin, who produces my online content, and frankly, producing online content is all I'm capable of doing these days. That, walking a dog, going for brief runs furtively. I used to get in trouble for going out trying to buy crack and heroin. Now I'm worried that I might go on a jog for too long. Oi, how long's that jog lasted? Oh, I've barely begun my jog. Why are you so out of breath? I've got emphysema. I've always been a bit wheezy. You're vulnerable. Get back home. I used to be a crackhead. You're double vulnerable. You shouldn't even be out of the house. Quick question here from, if you've got to tell me who the questions are from, Jen, that's part of the joy of being a questioner. Are you concerned about your hypochondriac friend, Matt Morgan? No. Hypochondriacs love this. Matt Morgan has been preparing for a pandemic since he was 5 years old. I spoke to him months ago. He was like, I ain't left the house in ages. There's this thing, coronavirus. I go, what are you talking about, coronavirus? Listen, get indoors. Coronavirus is coming. Now, I can't talk to him no more because he'll be so smug about it and so like, I told you about that coronavirus. You know, when like someone's into a band before they get big and then the band gets big and they go, I don't really like it. I bet it'll be like that about coronavirus. I've gone, I was into coronavirus when no one cared about it, man. So no, I've not checked on him, but I know that he will be smugly relishing the whole coronavirus situation. Another easy question. Were you happy when you were a teenager, says Trophy or Trophy? No, I bloody wasn't, mate. I was really miserable. I was well on the way to becoming a pretty serious drug addict. If you are a teenager and you're unhappy, you should certainly consider contacting The Mix. We just made a video about The Mix. They're a fantastic online support community that you can reach out to. And let's put their details in the description. The Mix are a wonderful organisation that help young people. And yeah, just Google them. You're a young person, you'll be able to find it easily, won't you? They help you with mental health issues, addiction issues. And if they'd have been around when I was a young kid, perhaps I'd have been slightly less of a pain in the arse. Any advice on avoiding alcohol, says Sean Penhow? Yeah, don't buy any, stay indoors and start joining what I will call anonymous 12-step groups that are based around abstinence from substances or alcohol or whatever it is that's your problem. Those groups may not be perfect in their online form, but they're certainly better than being terribly alone, mate. So I say give that a shot. There's no reason for you to drink or use drugs ever again. In fact, the thing that you are looking for is a spiritual connection that you will not be able to access through drink or drugs. You're looking to, well, I would estimate, I'll talk about my own drink and drug use, deal with the pain, deal with feeling lonely, deal with not feeling good enough. Though alcohol could never work for you again, but the spiritual connection always will. Investigate it. Award-winning. What does that say? How can I stop this, Django? I want to see like some of these comments. Why don't you turn that screen around the other way? Big up, enlarge, and show me stuff. We're just making this up on the fly. I've not done live videos before, and by God, though, I'll do them again if it's a success. You're about 2 seconds after me, I can see from watching my own little screen there. Cheska, what do you do when you find it hard to empty your mind and meditate properly? It is hard to empty your mind. That's part of the meditative process. You've got to get yourself into a state where you don't judge the meditation, where you don't think, oh, I'm meditating badly. Say it's mantra meditation that you're doing. The way I was taught it by Bobby Roth from the David Lynch Foundation was you sit, you close the old eyes for a little bit, you allow the thoughts to come. You can't do anything about thoughts coming. The mind is going to think. That's what the mind does. But we become aware that we are not the contents of our mind. We are the awareness that observes this content. So if you're like, you sit down to try and meditate and you're like, oh no, this happened when I was at school, I'm worried about coronavirus, oh bloody hell. You could think anything, that there's limitless avenues you can explore in your own mind. Someone told me that dear lovely Matt Goss the other day said you can go wherever you want in your mind. And Matt Goss is right about that. It's the first time I've quoted Matt Goss since the good old glory days of when will I be famous. So what you need to do is watch the contents of your mind. And if you're doing mantra meditation, you return to the mantra gently, not hurriedly. And if you're doing, say, breath meditation, you return to the awareness of the breath. See Eckhart Tolle, he'll teach you that right now you hold up your hands, if you have hands, and you will feel that there's life in them, awareness in your hands. Even if you're not touching anything, you can feel life in it. That life is not thought, it's a kind of awareness, a kind of energy. Bring your attention to this. It's very good at moving your mind away from the thoughts. It's normal to have a load of activity when you're trying to meditate. It's just what the mind does, mate. So don't beat yourself up about it, is what I will say. I'm going to bring this closer so I can read it. Oh dear, there's some really interesting things go by, but it's shooting by at such a rate, Jen. Like, I need you to isolate and pull over, or somehow enlarge clips for me. Can you do that so I can respond to people more quickly? Some people are doing very intelligent things with emojis. That's very smart. It makes them more observable, but nothing can stop the cavalcade of pace. And that's the real issue here. L.M. Kemi. What do you have to say to people who find it hard to dwell in their own silence? It's normal to feel that. Kim PJJIJJ, how do you stop fearing death? It's difficult to stop fearing death, mate. It's very natural to fear death. Like my cat is dying. You know, it's not even a human being. And just to watch the reality of death and the amount of emotion that's tied into it, it's very, very challenging and very, very painful. You know, because that cat, in a sense, is a portal to a different time. 16 years ago, 1 year clean, when I got that cat, all the memories embedded in him, all of the silence, all of the love that me and that little animal have shared. But I suppose what I have to accept is impermanence, and that the love I feel for this animal and that I feel for other people is that abides. We can stay connected to that. What is it in me that is feeling this loss? In a sense, separation and transience are illusory if we all come from the same physical source, meaning even just that explosion. We're all made basically of the same component parts and chemical constructions. So me and that cat are forever adrift amidst the interstellar, which is a film that's heavily influencing my answer to that question. Connor Roche says, your 5 favourite books of all time. I like Moby Dick quite a lot. Check that out. It's mental. Let's see what books are up here. Who do I have up here that's good? The Guilty Feminist, Reasons to Stay Alive, Matt Haig, Buddha, Be More Pirate, fantastic book. John Keats, Rumi. I mean, it's all up here. Ben Elton, Steven Pinker, Fern Cotton. Books about 12 steps, how to look after a bonsai plant. You could pick basically any one of those books and it would do the job for you. Just tend to a bonsai tree accurately. All right, let's do a little bit of this breathwork thing. And Jen, go, while I'm doing that, pull like about 5 or 10 of these little old questions or comments and we'll do that. Now, you might not, if you're aware of Wim Hof, the Iceman, he's the guest that's on Under the Skin on the very next episode of it. It'll be freely available to you. We'll be pumping it down your feed. That's courtesy of Luminary, the platform that I do Under the Skin on. Wim Hof, who has his own app, the link is in the description, talked me through his techniques when I've done it again the other day. It's fantastic stuff. We take deep inhalations 30 or to 40 times until you feel a real aliveness in the body. I was talking to an actor earlier that I worked with on a film last year or earlier this year. Who knows how time works anymore? And he said he'd been doing it and he got up to 2.5 minutes. I didn't want to tell him, but I've actually got up to 3 minutes using this technique. So you inhale orally as fully as you can, remembering that you feel the belly, the chest, and even the head with breath. And then you exhale, but you don't push out the exhale. Let me demonstrate. Now remember, I'm not Wim Hof or even a breath expert. If you want the proper real deal stuff, go to Wim. But that's me doing it. And I can see that my shoulders are going up and lots of breath people say, oh, that's not cool. But this is how you do it. You get it down in that belly. And like with the exhale, you just let it come out. You may get your dog rolled up, bears come over for a look. You good boy, ain't you, mate? You do 30 or 40 of those breaths. Trying to fill yourself up, and you may start to feel a little bit of tingling as the blood oxygenates, as the body is energized in a new way that it's not familiar with. When you've done about 30 or 40 of those breaths, You exhale and then hold. You hold the breath for as long as you can. After 3 or 4 rounds of it, you might be able to get up to 2 or 3 minutes without breathing. All kinds of autoimmune systems kick in that have been inaccessible to you before. After you've done the breath hold, you do 30 or 40 of those breaths that I've demoed. You hold for as long as you can. Wim Hof said, you don't need to time it. It's not about timing it. It's about the feeling of it, not trying to measure it. That's what's wrong with the world today. We want to quantify everything. We want to turn everything into a league table. But I do time it because it's satisfying to see, like, oh my God, I just held my breath for 3 minutes. After you've held your breath for 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 1 minute, whatever it is, whatever your capacity is, you take a deep inhalation and then you hold it. Wim Hof said you tighten up like this. All this is in the Under the Skin episode and on Wim Hof's app. You tighten up, you pull in what are called Uddiyana Bandha and Mula Bandha. That is these locks that are between your reproductive organs and your bum and right there in the core of your abdomen. You pull them in, you tighten up, you pull that air right into yourself. Man, you'll feel fantastic. Do 3 rounds of that. It's good gear. If you're a smoker, you might want to knock the smoking on the nut. And if you're doing illegal drugs in a smoky way, naughty, you'll have to stop. But I tell you one thing, as a person that did used to smoke his drugs, this will give you that kind of same high, particularly when you do that. Oh, it takes you back to the glory days, even if it's just weed you're smoking. What you think? I've got to say, someone comes in the room when you've just taken a hit, you think, oh, all right, yeah. And you've got to hold it in. I mean, there's still the smell of this, isn't there? And probably these days, weed's legal most places and you can vape it odorlessly. Kids today, you don't know you're born, do you? Anyway, that's partly what the breathing technique's like. I do 3 or 4 rounds of that. And then what I do is this Kundalini exercise. Kundalini yoga is predicated on using the creative and survival energies that are in the lower spine in Ayurvedic philosophy, pulling them right up the serpent of the spine till it is coronated here in the higher chakras. Now, you might think that sounds phony, baloney, Maloney madness, but check it out, right? When you do this, I do this one sat on my knees. Or you put your heels under your bum, you know, like as if you was going to pray. You sit down like that and you pump your belly like this. Now, the teacher who told me it, she said, just do breaths. Right, I've done about 30 of them, of course, because I'm a drug addict and I want to take things to the next level. Right, after you've done like 30, you want to go harder. Maybe you want to take this into the next level. You do this one. And then you sort of stand onto your knees, you know, you take your bum off of your heels and stand on your knees as if you were doing like a Morecambe and Wise sketch where you pretending to be Toulouse-Lautrec, putting shoes under your knees in the raincoat, or you'd be in a Muppet Man, like in a Muppet film where you put shoes under your knees. You basically understand what I'm saying, don't you? You're sitting on your heels and then you stand onto your knees. You do that on an inhalation. So you're going, and then you stand onto your knees with a massive inhalation. You pull that energy in. Now, I wasn't taught this, but I started to do it. I pulled the hands up above the head like that. I sucked that energy right up. And then, then the glory, a second consciousness revealed beneath this thinking mind that all of you are troubled by. How do I meditate with this ever corroming thinking mind? Well, by being certain that beneath that frequency of thoughts, there is another consciousness, an ulterior consciousness, which I vividly experience in these moments. It's like this brain, the Russell brain, the brain, you know, you're you, I'm me. You're the you that you were when you're free, the you that you were when you were 5, when you were 12, when you were 19, if you're old enough to have lived through all those ages. You feel, because you know you're you, don't you? When you wake up in the morning, you don't go, oh my God, who am I? Where's my yacht? Am I in the Jamaican shores? No, you know, unless you do live in the Jamaican shores, you know that you're you. There is an ongoing narrative of you-ness. Well, when you do that exercise, it's like that drops out, that frequency drops out. Now, a medical person, a doctor say, might say, well, what you're doing there, I saw, is you're hyperventilating and nearly passing out. And that is a good medical description of what's happening. But what it feels like from a spiritual perspective is that the reoxygenation of the body changes something as fundamental as perspective to the point where you lose yourself. And more importantly still, in my view, there is a second mind, a second consciousness there waiting to receive you. Those of you that have done psychedelics, you'll have experienced it. I've not done acid for a long time, not since I was a little kid, 16, not that little. But still too bloody young, actually. Don't deconstruct the ego right in the middle of constructing the ego, is what I will say. Right, I'm just learning who I am, and now for some LSD. Particularly not the way I did it, just as a little kid hanging out with nutters. Like, taking psychedelics, it should be done with either a shaman or a doctor, not with some lad from Leeds in New Cross Gate, or like hanging out at a bus stop or whatever. That is not the way to encounter limitless consciousness, to dissolve your constructed egoic self. Do that with a doctor or a shaman. Anyway, those of you that have had those experiences will recognize that there is an ulterior consciousness waiting for you. That's how we cope with something like this global pandemic, is by accepting that whilst there are many challenging things, sad things, and we're all on a league table of how deeply we're affected, but obviously depending on how healthy we are, what economic resources we have, but isn't that always the same? Aren't people that are economically privileged always in a better position? Aren't people that have got healthier bodies always in a better position, generally speaking? When you're facing these challenges, if there is an aspect to your being that is not connected to the transient and impermanent, but is an acknowledgement of a deeper state, you will find the experience a lot easier. You will find any experience a lot easier. There is something within you calling you home. You look for it everywhere. You look for it in food and sex and drugs and relationships and other people's approval. And a situation like this one will test you. The way you feel about being denied work or having to go to work, or how fearful you feel about vulnerable people, or if you're a vulnerable person yourself, how fearful you feel. But beneath all these transient, oscillating, higher, what do I want to say, more superficial, cutaneous waves of emotion, there is a great depth, deeper currents of consciousness that are accessible to you and indeed are your birthright. That's why I suggest to you a meditative practice and maybe a little bit of moving your arms about, in no way in particular. This was also taught to me by Wim Hof after we got in a cold river together. We stood on the banks of old Father Thames, and Wim Hof, that screen's gone dead, was doing this. My dog was coming up to us, and I said, Wim, what is that you're doing? Is it Tai Chi? And because I was doing it too, I started copying him. I was in my underpants on a riverbank. I goes, is that Tai Chi, Wim? And he went, no, I'm just making it up. Wim Hof, inventing martial arts. Why wouldn't you? Let's have a look at some of the questions you've sent through. Lacey Jorgensen, Russell, do you believe this is a way for the government to gain total control? I don't believe it's a deliberate conspiratorial attempt, but if you look at The Economist today, or whenever it was, and I'm not a regular reader of The Economist, by the way, Adam Curtis, the genius filmmaker, you should check out Adam Curtis' blog, you should look at his brilliant films, Century of the Self, Bitter Lake. That dude's a hyper normalization, he's a next level genius. I'm talking to him. He's sent me this article from The Economist, which talks about often when these kind of measures are taken, the extreme economic measures that have been taken to prop up the various economies of wealthy countries, they are not rescinded, and often often the controls that are asserted are similarly enduring, i.e. there's a lot of monitoring going on apparently in South Korea and China, observation of people's movements. Oh, a minute, this person's phone's telling me they're out and about living it up, living the vida loco. Get back in your fucking drum. Oh, I thought I wasn't allowed to swear then, but it's YouTube and you are allowed to swear. You're absolutely free. That's my own professionalism. Is it okay to bum a horse, says Spectre 69? I don't think it is, actually, because they can't consent. So I'd have to say that it is not okay to do that. And you shouldn't really have had to ask, to be honest. I mean, if you're that close to bumming a horse and that your recourse is to come to me, old Russ, a man on YouTube in his pajamas, running some ad hoc yogic and Ayurvedic counsel, and say, is equine sodomy fine? You need to get some different relationships in your life, and might I suggest human relationships. Now, I know you're mucking about, we're just having a bit of a laugh, aren't we? This is our spirit, isn't it? It's our wartime spirit. Sandra Merkin, do you believe you can achieve enlightenment? Of course you can. Everyone can achieve enlightenment, the same way as you can achieve a face. It's inborn within us. It's in our DNA. It's trying to realize itself right now. But don't take my word for it. Go and listen to the episodes of Under the Skin where Michael Singer, the writer of the great book Untethered Soul, or Michael Beckwith, the great agape preacher, explain that this bliss is within us. Maharishi Mahesh believed the same thing. Yogananda believed the same thing. Jesus Christ believed the same thing, that within us there is limitless glory that is veiled. We must get the scales from off of our eyes. We cannot see the glory. We cannot see the bliss. As Del Boy said, there's none so blind as them what will not listen. As them that cannot see is, of course, the correct ecclesiastical quote there. But it's within us. We become distracted, and some of the stuff we were talking about earlier to do with awareness and meditative techniques is a way of obviously unlocking that enlightenment. Eckhart Tolle would say that enlightenment is the ability or the capacity, the realization of staying in the moment. Where are you right now? Be present in the exact moment you're in. Eckhart Tolle said you can only be content if you fully experience the aliveness of the moment you're in. Of course, you can be distracted. I spent half my life looking for forms of pleasure and distraction through stimulation and subjugation of my own mind, but it's not a lasting game. Have you read The Secret? Andy Hamill says, no, I ain't, mate. You kill me, Russ. Jack. Oh, it's going by so quickly. Kid Trinity, I'm here. So some of you are just talking to each other. Oh, that's all right. So I don't need to mediate that because I can see that you're just chatting. Well, that's a bit impolite, actually. You shouldn't do it now. Carry on, chat away. That's what I'm doing. Glam Lou. What about food addiction? Do you have any advice, as you can't be abstinent from food forever? I do, actually. Food and sex addiction, they're known as sex and food are nutritional behaviors. Food is necessary. Sex, one could argue, is necessary. In these areas, there is a technique called HOW, honest, open, and willingness. The HOW technique is to create circles of behavior. Desirable behavior in the center, i.e. eating healthily, eating at preordained meal times, having a calorie intake that's been agreed with someone else, not you. If you're a person that doesn't eat enough, or even if you're a person that overeats, then you have an agreed upon amount of calories and healthy foods. Then outside that, you have unhealthy foods that you prefer not to eat, and then you have outside of that, this is I ain't doing this stuff. That would making yourself vomit, or if it was a sexual addiction, paying for sex or looking at pornography. Absolutely behaviors that are not for me as a food addict or a sex addict to engage in. So there is a technique. What it is identifying healthy behaviors along with another person, not trusting your own crazy mind to come up with it. And then one day at a time, with the support of other people that are on the same path as you, aspiring to live by those healthy behaviors. I hope that helps you, Glam Lou. An 80s metal woman. I hope you're doing okay. I'm scared. Listen, 80s metal woman. Fear is a natural, evolved aspect of being human. I was taught that there is wisdom fear and neurotic fear. Wisdom fear is the awareness that there are threats in the world. There are things to be concerned about. Neurotic fear is allowing ourselves to live in imaginary spirals, being occupied, haunted by events and circumstances that haven't taken place yet. We cannot live in this neurotic fear. Your fear is trying to teach you something, mate. It's saying stay aware, stay awake, and possibly there are things in your life, 80s metal woman, that you could change. There might be relationships that need to change. There might be circumstances that need to change. And when better than in the middle of this lockdown to contemplate that? You might have economic reasons to be fearful, or health reasons to be fearful, or there may just be a general anxiety because of this continually stoked situation where our fears are escalating. Man, I'm looking at too much news. I'm really taking it on myself that I could do the news. Hello, welcome to the COVID news. In England, the lockdown might be increased. Italy's had its biggest death toll, not greatest death toll. It's like a bloody league table, isn't it, of death, for Christ's sake. I'm like reading much too much on this stuff. Donald Trump said this, Boris Johnson said that. We must fucking well stay at home. there's a point where it doesn't help. The basic information seems to be stay at home, wash your hands, keep your head down, communicate with people. Like, I mean, I suppose the more spiritual aspect of it, the more sort of sociological aspect of it is stay connected, don't go isolated. Because whilst I read in that book, brilliant book by Sebastian Junger, Tribe, that sometimes crises, and like in Viktor Frankl's masterpiece, I can't remember it, but it's the book he wrote during the Holocaust. One of you will know it. His experiences being interned in a Nazi concentration camp. That crisis brings out the kind of truth in people. And anecdotally, and I think actually scientifically, there are studies that sort of mental health changed. No one committed suicide. The people found new aspects of themselves, connected in new ways. And famously, after 9/11, suicide rates dropped. No rise in mental health conditions or whatever. It's almost as if some aspects of crisis create conditions that are closer to our native condition than the complex, convoluted societies we live in now. Imagine the creatures we're evolved from. Imagine the creatures that we're genetically almost identical to before the advent of agriculture, trying to conceive of a culture where a man would sit talking down YouTube at thousands of people. Absolutely absurd. We're not designed for this. We're not designed for the amount of sugar and fat that we eat, for the amount of time we spend staring at screens, which we're doing right now, but hopefully in a devoted way, in a way that may bring about some peace in us. This is the petition that we make, that somewhere within our consciousness there is a higher aspect of us waiting to be awakened and realized, laying there dormant and unaddressed because of the conditions that we live within, because we're continually distracted and stimulated by systems that consider our subjugation to be a priority and our awakening never to be a possibility. Our petition to the highest aspects of ourselves, to the deep intelligence that runs our anatomy, that's running my respiratory system, my cardiovascular system, that's keeping these words flowing in a language that I did not create, that you can understand, that you did not create, the endless interconnectivity of humanity, the deep intelligence that exists within all nature and within the cosmos herself. This deep intelligence is accessible and malleable to us. We can reach into it. We are it. The identity, the person that we believe ourselves to be, is temporary. And finally, I'm happy with that bit of my hair. Now, who is it from, this one? How did you find your higher power? Says, I can't see the name, Jen. Could you always give me the name, Jen, as well as the person? I like to see who's asking it. Oh no, it's Travis Lindsay. I can see it. How did you find your higher power? My higher power was shown to me. I'm a 12-step person. I was lucky enough to be taught to get off drugs and alcohol by 12-step people. And the higher power concept is like a God of your own understanding, not an oppressive, aggressive, patriarchal, anthropomorphic God that's judging you or whatever, or cares about who you have sex with, but a God that is loving and connected to you, benevolent and nourishing. And I found it because other people were so kind and loving to me and patient with me and tolerant with me and prepared to teach me that, there was another way, another path. Then through prayer and meditation, I got it through 12 steps. 1, recognizing there's a problem. 2, believing it could change. 3, recognizing that I myself was not going to didn't have the solution, and that there were aspects to consciousness and being and nature that I didn't understand that were more powerful than me. 4, I made an inventory. 5, I shared that inventory with somebody else, and that helped me to let go of the shame. 6, I recognized there were loads of patterns that I'd been contributing to my own misery. Instead of looking at the world with continual blame, oh, this person done that and this institution done that, then that happened, I realized that I was participating in my misery through my own behavior. I became willing to change it. And then step 7, I humbly asked for that behavior to be removed one day at a time. I asked to not be the person I used to be. I asked to be different. 8, I made a list of people I'd harmed. 9, I made amends to those people. That means I apologized to them. If I owed them something, I gave them that thing. 10, I stay aware and awake, and I watch myself. I watch my turbulent emotions. I watch the external stimulation, and I make errors every single day. And when I make those errors, I admit it to another person that's been in the game and been awakened for longer than me. And I say, look, I've done this thing. What should I do? And if I follow their bloody suggestions, is frankly what I do. Step 11 is prayer and meditation. This is a deepening understanding of the nature of power. Do you truly think we understand all reality with our limited senses, with our limited capacity for knowledge? The senses are limited. We only see a certain light range. We only hear a certain audio range. The brain, the mind, consciousness, our individual consciousness is limited, but information is limitless. Look at the studies taking place in the sub-particular, sub-molecular world, the glorious mysteries and poetry emerging from that space, that unspace, that dark matter, that antimatter. We know very little, we know nothing. So we're always going to require faith. Faith is going to have to be a component of human existence. And if we want to create different worlds, different societies, if we want to emerge from the ashes of this madness with something other than just a fear of shaking hands, then we need to embrace arcane wisdom. 12th step is, having done all that stuff, you go around helping other people wherever the hell you can. Comment a challenge to your video. Now, we've done some breath work, as I promised. We've had a good ramble. We've asked some questions. We've answered some questions. You guys are chatting away like crazy. A lot of you are putting frogs up. That's to do with Keke and all that dude. I don't mind any of that. You just communicate, you little beauties. Express yourselves. Glory unto all of you. What should I look at, Jengo? These challenging comments. Yeah. Right, now look, I talk about anarcho-syndicalism and dissolving centralized power structures where possible to empower people democratically so that we can all participate in our communities. As Hannah Arendt said, we have no real civic life. We live out our private lives in public, but when are we contributing to the creation of community? That is a necessary part of being human. Well, someone responded to one of my comments, I guess, from one of these YouTube videos, Margarine's son. She says, I love Russell. Thanks. I really do. I have done for years, but I'm sorry. This is one of those instances where he's getting carried away by the fancy of his own ideas. That's never happened. He's making so many careless, shallow and incorrect assertions, then dressing them up in purple prose. That doesn't sound like me. He talks about tribalism as if there's something divine or special about it. No, I'm not talking about it as divine or special, just as a anthropologically relevant and consistent aspect of human existence for hundreds of thousands of years prior to what we would call civilization. Someone needs to remind us that we did live in tribal systems, have decided they weren't effective enough for us to stick with for obvious reasons. Right, well, now let's have a look at those obvious reasons. I would say, look, there are advantages to civilization, there are advantages to cooperation, there are obvious advantages to medicine and technology, but much of what I lament is the result of the hierarchies that arise around these systems. Take, for example, agriculture and the impact of agriculture on the human diet. Agriculture means that a lot of people now are working to create a single crop, and as a result, their diets change. The upside is, oh no, there is now greater availability of food. But even that assumes that the sole goal of human life is proliferation, profligation, more and more of us abundantly, virally spilling over every single surface of the planet, devouring the resources, subjugating the beings that we share the earth with. In tribal societies, we recognize our limitations. We recognize the need for cooperation. It's not so easy for a few people at the top of the system to dominate and to cream off all of the profit, but it may lead to a more connected society. For example, plagues and epidemics were also around when we lived in tribal systems. You know what happened when we had epidemics? That in those days, they rampaged through society and killed most of us. Although if we were living in atomized tribes, those pandemics wouldn't be able to traverse as easily, would they? So, but because of globalization, because of continual communication and interconnectivity, that does obviously facilitate the spread of virus. I'm not suggesting we should all be separate and distinct from one another, but did you look at that Lao Tzu verse that I posted that talked about in eerie Zen prophetic terms? I think it's verse 80 of the Tao by Lao Tzu. He says something along the lines of, people are going to drop out and be at home and will reflect. They will see their neighbor and not, but not bug their neighbor. Obviously, he didn't use these exact terms, but in a sense, I don't think we're designed or evolved, let's say, to live in a globalized society such as the one we live in now. So much conflict, so much contradiction, so much contrariness, I think comes from the fact that we're meant to just be with 150 people. That don't mean we can't love everyone and accept everyone, and that everyone don't have the right to create this sort of systems and lifestyles as long as it's harmonious with one another and the planet herself. That's not what this is about. This is not about the imposition of some universal law. Far from it. One tribe that have this belief, another tribe that have this belief, one tribe that have these religious practices, one tribe that have these sexual practices, and all of them fully autonomous, fully empowered, fully free. Centralization only when necessary for municipal issues such as health, such as some law and order, as democratically decided upon by the individual and collective members of these tribes. I am talking about a confederacy, and believe you me, it will be a sad thing if after this crisis we meekly return to our old ways. If we, after the hunkering down, hunker back on with our hunkered lifestyles, forgetting the great glory and possibility that is within all of us, but also the simplicity that can make human life so deeply enjoyable. I think there's a lot to learn from this situation, and I actually think, Marjorie's son, I love you as well, but if I had someone else to read out your points, I think I would happily argue every single one of them. But I've not got time to do that, because I'm going to tell you a few other things before we wrap this up. I want you to check out Charles Eisenstein's article, The Coronation, sent to me by the great Wendy Mandy, glorious shaman, she-witch, magic-wielding lunatic that she is. Check out that beautiful article by Charles Eisenstein. Check out Adam Curtis's blog. And in the description here, there are some brilliant chants that you might like, some things that you can spend a little bit of time doing, like the wonderful Kundalini chant, Rama Dasa Sase So Hung, Rama Dasa Sase So Hung. You might at first think, I ain't sitting around doing these bloody chants, but let me tell you, a lot of the people I hang with, they're people that, you know, they're not from hippy dippy backgrounds, and they love this shit. The Rama Dasa Sase So Sung. This divine vibration, it helps you to access dormant aspects of yourself. It becomes comforting. Choral singing always induces this, whether it's you know, yogic or otherwise. Rama Dasa So Say So Sung, fantastic. Or it could just be I'm forever blowing bubbles, or you'll never walk alone. You know, football chants. But I believe there is a deep divinity within some of these chants. The link is down there in the description. That Tich that no, what is it again? Tich Nhat Hanh. Well done, you learned it so quickly. Tich Nhat Hanh, that meditation there, I've been doing that. That's in there. Muji, I don't know if he's in there, but MOOJI, check him out. Use this time to cultivate some of your dormant spirituality, your latent and neglected spirituality. It is hard. There might be some tears. I recognize your fear. I recognize your sadness, but it's going to get, well, I don't know if it's going to get immediately easier, but what I will say is it's going to get real. Shannon Burrow, what are your thoughts on mythology? I think that there are deep universal truths that express themselves uniquely through various cultures, depending on the inflections and context of that particular culture. And there's so much wisdom and truth in mythology. I really love the work of Carl Jung and the work of Joseph Campbell, precisely because it sort of suggests that in spite of our apparent superficial differences, we have much that bonds us, that there are certain truths and narratives that re-emerge throughout time, throughout society. Katrina Jablonski, do you consider yourself to be a philosopher? No. With which philosopher do you most identify? I like a little bit of Nietzsche. I like a little bit of Jung. Who have I been into lately? I like Yogananda. You know, Paranoid Android. Trying to follow this chat is like trying to decipher hieroglyphs on DMT. Yeah, I bet. I wish I could take that stuff, man. But any drug that you take through a pipe, I guess I'm going to have to let that pass for a while. Sam Larang, love you, Russ. How can we balance living in this moment with setting and achieving goals? Well, I suppose if we are in tune, the kind of goals that we're drawn towards may be more suitable and appropriate. You know, you can't argue with this reality. We're all going to have to accept this is going on now. This is actually happening. So if we resist that, it's going to be really, really painful for us. We're going to have to accept that things are going to happen in their own time, not in a time that we determine. We've lost that power now. And if we the more we resist it, the more anxiety, more despair it's going to create in us. But I think that the people that talk about this being an opportunity, aside from the obvious suffering that it's causing, they're right. Because there's, you know, we can only do what we can about the suffering. The individual opportunities, we're responsible for that, aren't we? I don't know if I'm doing enough, going on occasional runs with my dog. Jenny says we'll go running with them. The strides are too short. I'm doing little mouse strides. I need to elongate them with my big daft giraffe legs. I'm meditating the shit out of life and looking after my dear, beautiful little cat as he lives out his last, a glorious living icon of the times I've lived through. In the end, we will return to compassion and love. We will recognize that we don't want to be defined by fear and hatred and loathing. We don't want to live in contempt, that we want to find forgiveness for the people that have harmed us, forgiveness for ourselves, and that we want to move deeper within ourselves to love. Now, that's not something that I'm capable of doing on my own. I can only do that with enormous collective support. So I'll be grateful to you if you can provide it for me, and I'll do whatever I can to provide it for you. I like to sign off with a singing of the song Inside of You from the film Forgetting Sarah Marshall, written by Jason Segel, starring Jason Segel, directed by Nicholas Stoller, and I was in it and all as a bloke. It was like me. Old as ancient skies, I've had these wandering eyes, but you took me by surprise when you let me inside of you, inside of you, inside of you. I long to be, is it wrong to be inside of you? Inside of you, I can cross these desert plains. Inside of you, I can something go insane. Inside of you, all the world unfurls. I cross my heart and I've crossed the world. Is it wrong to be? I long to be inside of you. Inside of you. I'm not singing this to the dog, by the way. Like we've already dealt with that horse question. Inside of you. Come up there. Do you come up here? You're a good boy. He's a good boy, that bear, isn't he? He's a good boy, that bear. Look at him, my lad. What a little darling. All right, hey, look after yourselves, you crazy lunatics. Enjoy the trippy experience of going to supermarkets. Stay as free as you possibly can. Love one another, and wherever you fall on the crazy political or spiritual spectrum, I adore you and I love you. Stay free, keep communicating, keep doing what you're doing. Don't let this turn you crazy. Don't let it turn you into a pallid onanist staring at a screen, strumming at your midriff. Use this not for distraction, but for a kind of spiritual traction, because within you there is a deep divinity trying to realize itself. Isn't there, Bear? Isn't there? He's a good boy. Isn't you? You my boy? Aww. Yeah, I love you. All right, take it easy, you lot. I love you. See you later. See you again. Let us know. Ask me any questions. Any questions. I'll answer them, especially if I don't know the answer.